Continuing our conversation, here goes our first question, but I'll club the two questions together. Brief talk about great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in on December 21st, 2020, and its after effects. Along with that, your what is your venture, Temple of Evolutionary Emergence, all about? A little her story on it, and what led to the erasure of feminine teachings on the planet in the past. Let me know.
Okay. The first question about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which is a huge question. I will try to condense that as much as possible.
Yeah.
So what we called the Great Conjunction, which occurred on the winter solstice of 2020, was, in my opinion, and I should make the disclaimer, I am not an astrologer. I do not claim to be an astrologer. I use the science of astrology to come to certain conclusions based on history, based on geopolitics, based on science, to to guide the people that follow me in the temple to certain conclusions about how we can prepare and plan and chart our own course, right? So I pay attention to astrologers who do that for a living. I pay attention to them, but because I recognize that their worldview is limited. Their worldview is limited. Their iconography is limited. They still, like most astrologers, come to the conclusions that they come to based on a strictly Greco-Roman iteration of our relationship to the cosmos, our relationship to the planets, our relationship to the stars, and it's a very limited worldview. And so, but they are still very good at what they do within this limited, worldview that they have. The thing that I'm always, encouraging people to do is to learn what their cultural, traditional ancestors had to say about our relationship to heaven. Because Greeks and Romans were not the only people in the history of humans studying the stars and our relationships to the planet. All of our people had something to say about our relationship to the cosmos. And that is a good way and a good frame of reference to begin to study and understand astrology. Fortunately, we live in a world right now where Vedic astrology is becoming just as popular and well accepted as Greco-Roman, Greco-Roman astrology. So that's really another avenue that people can take if they're trying to venture away from that. It's important to say that because since the Great Conjunction, which happened in 2020, it was like I understood minimally the impact that this event was going to have. But subsequent to that event, it was like, oh my God, it's been in our face the whole time, this preparation for this coming event. And what I mean is, I love movies. I believe that spirit is attempting to communicate to us through these mediums of media and film and music. Spirit is attempting to communicate something to us if we pay attention. And so after the conjunction, which I talked about for months and months and months before the conjunction, I started seeing discussions about the conjunction everywhere, places I'd never seen it, movies I'd seen 1,000 times and had never heard it. And then I'm rewatching the movie and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I don't know if you remember the movie The Dark Crystal. They ended up doing a remake of it 2 years later, but it came out in the 80s when I was a kid. The Dark Crystal, they've done like 2 remakes of it. In The Dark Crystal, which is this fantasy about these alien societies. It's a children's movie. It's a little dark for children, but it's a children's movie.
There were many alien movies that came along. Yeah, many of them.
Well, this one in particular, the whole controversy between this alien, society invades another one, but under the guise of being under the guise of being beneficent, right? We just want to bring you the gifts of technological advances, and we don't really want anything in return. We're just good like that. And so the people were like, oh my gosh, these guys are really cool. Well, let's just invite them to live on our planet and everything. The whole time they found this rare mineral called the dark crystal that could power them up. But the problem with the crystal is that it powered the entire planet. It gave this every species on the planet its life force. And so these alien creatures, took over the planet as a religion. They became the religious leaders of the whole planet under the guise of being religious leaders. They were literally siphoning the energy of the entire planet
Happens
to
even
preserve
today.
their life.
Happens even
Exactly.
now.
So anyway, the whole thing, there was a whole idea about the cycles on this planet, and one of the main components was about this period in the future during the Great Conjunction, la 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 la, right? I was like, oh my God, I just watched it recently. I was like, how did I never know that? There's another show called The Wheel of Time that was just on Prime recently. It's a very recent show. If you haven't seen it, you should. You
Okay.
should. It's called
Sure.
Wheel of Time. And it's about these cycles of, great technological advances and then human beings being thrust back into barbarism, and great, cycles of advancement. And then again, thrust into barbarism, the wheel of time, the wheel keeps spinning out these cycles until we learn the lessons, right?
Hmm.
Same thing. There's this point in the wheel of time where they go back in time where these people 1,000 years ago were so technologically advanced, and now they're living like serfs, right? And the change came during, quote, the Great Conjunction, right? There's another show, this is the last one I'll mention. It's called The Witcher. The Witcher.
Which,
And The Witcher is about this period in human history where there are people that are like they're human hybrids called witchers, and they hunt monsters. So on this earth, there are now elves, dwarves, monsters, and humans. And these elves, dwarves, monsters, and humans live in caste societies. So humans are the highest on the caste, elves are the lowest on the caste, right? But on this earth or on this planet where they all exist in these hierarchies, it wasn't always that way. Nobody ever questioned where monsters came from. Nobody ever questioned how humans, dwarves, and elves all ended up on the same planet. So after 2 seasons, they go, quote, back to the beginning, back to the origin of all things. And on this planet that they are on, that looks like an Earth-like planet, there were only elves. There were elves and animals. That was it. There were hierarchies among the elves, but only elves existed. And there was this elf who was born of a lower caste who was starving for power. He was insanely lusty for power. And so he learned how to break the time fabric where he could travel through dimensions to acquire power from other entities. Something happens in his last travel into another dimension where he offers a human sacrifice to this entity who promises him the power to control the entire planet with which he lives. But the power that he acquired broke the time fabric in a way that all the dimensions began to merge. They called this the conjunction of the spheres, or the Great Conjunction, where all of the planets lined up in a single file line. And when they did, the dimensions crossed over one another. And when the catastrophe of the event was complete, elves woke up from a global sleep, and all of a sudden there were humans everywhere, and there were dwarves everywhere, and there were monsters everywhere, because this tear in the dimension and time fabric caused entities from other planets to end up on their planet, where now the elves ran everything. But in this future where the Witcher exists, and the Witcher ends up being a hybrid of two of the species, where the Witcher is like the guy that kills all the monsters or whatever. In this future where all of these creatures live on this planet together, here the elves were the only the only entities on the planet. Now they are the lowest caste on the planet, right? And so to me, going back after the Great Conjunction, after doing ceremony, I did ayahuasca. We did an ayahuasca retreat during the Great Conjunction in 2020.
Okay.
Baby, it was radical. I thought we were going to get abducted by aliens. I'm not joking, and I'm not saying that in a funny way. It was so much more radical than I ever could have imagined. I could have even fathomed. And we were out in the woods in Atlanta, Georgia, which is, 3,000 miles away from where I'm at. And it was unbelievable. And part of what happened during that ceremony was about this thing that kept coming, this download that kept coming, that nothing will ever be the same, that this day is the beginning and nothing will ever be the same, that the birthing pains of the new age are going to be brutal and they're going to be radical, but only good can come after the birthing pains are done. And so, since that conjunction, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I talk in
Uh,
parables. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to come in there. Everything that you said so far, it lit me up because I have gone through the exact experience the way you put it. It was a very traumatic experience of a relationship with me, but something to do. Now I'll come in terms of the planetary energy. So mine is much of the Aquarius Saturn energy, and there was a person I was talking to who had a lot of Mars energy. It literally
Mhm.
felt like the timelines were merging, the dimensions crisscrossing, and but his energy was not that great, and I had to stand through that and rise above that negative energy. And I did go through an experience where I felt the aliens, like I could see the eyes like that, they're on my face. I woke up in shock. That was August 2020, and I felt like the aliens are doing something, like they're drilling some light codes, and it was like my face and my mouth was wide open shouting. It was lot of energy, and
Yes.
I cannot deny their existence, but I'm not yet fully believing that is it really true, or is it something that they are just organisms that humans have ended up creating eventually.
Well,
Very much possible,
well,
you know.
Well, I'll tell you my personal position about, extraterrestrials, aliens, whatever, is, and I've always believed this, and in differing, degrees, but I feel like what we have to differentiate between is a popularized discussion about aliens and a real probability about the nature of our universe. It is to me the supreme expression of arrogance and ignorance to assume that the earth is the only planet in the entirety and the boundlessness of infinite universe that
Absolutely
can
not.
that has the capacity to sustain intelligent life. I think that is the most asinine and ridiculous thing.
We are,
However,
I
what I what
believe,
I do.
I think there definitely we are not the only living organisms, and ours is not the only planet. There are multiple such places, because I've seen it in my visions. I traveled, astral traveled to places which are way more beautiful, and a lot of things happened in 2020 and 2021. But when I did the rest of the research, a little going through this conspiracy rabbit hole and all of that, it started. Then I met a few other people where we contemplated that it is very much possible that a man or a human is such a mastermind, human like you and me. It could be some mastermind who has stitched somebody's hand, picked up somebody's leg, and created an person thing called alien. So we just don't
Well,
know yet.
I don't think it's that deep. I think that we give the white world too much credit. I think that when we get consumed, and that's why you don't hear me talk about extraterrestrials a lot on my page, though that is something that I'm very interested in and very passionate about, is
We
because it
should
is
talk
too
more.
easy for people to get distracted by conspiracy theories. I think conspiracy theories in general are a distraction.
Yeah.
Again, everything that I am
in a way.
concerned about is how is it that human beings have the ability in this period when all of these planetary alignments are providing for us the most beautiful opportunity to evolve as a species,
True.
all of these distractions that are put in the way to make sure that we don't evolve, right?
And
So that's why I don't, hold on.
military technology is one distraction which I have been personally feeling it.
That I don't want to get that deep off the
So
subject because, again, it is still based in a similar thing. My personal position about extraterrestrials, extraterrestrial life, whatever, is I believe that we are, as humans on Earth, I believe that we are still under a veil. Okay. So you think about when you're in your mother's womb, when you're in your mother's body, it's such a beautiful analogy too. When you are in your mother's body, you are a sentient being. You are fully aware. You are fully aware, right? You're still aware of your past lives. You are a highly intelligent being when you are in utero. However, you know that something is coming. You can feel it. You can hear it. You can sense it. You see light changes behind her belly. You can't prove it, but you know it's there, right? You hear people talking outside your mama's belly. You hear conversations. You can distinguish voices. You know your daddy voice. You know your mama voice, but you can't see anything. You have no evidence that there's something else on the other side of this current existence, but you're certain of it because there are these things. We call them downloads, or we call them intuitions, or we call them whatever. We sense that there's something more outside the paradigm that we currently are forced to exist. Castes and classes and and race and war and all of this shit. This is a veil forcibly imposed on human beings that
correct.
has severed us from our relationship from the cosmic one. I am certain, I believe that once the veil of these illusions are lifted, we will be able to see. We will be able to see clearly. Once we're born, we're like, oh, that's my dad right there. Oh, I got brothers and sisters. Look at that. I knew I heard people, even though I could not see them. I knew that there was something more, even though I had no evidence of it. I feel like that's who we are. We are little in utero babies waiting to emerge on the other side where we will be reconnected with the universal family. There are extraterrestrials. There are intelligent beings all around us waiting for us to wake the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? Waiting for us to surpass the veil. You feel me? And they're like, come on, babies. They're like the little midwives. They're like the little cosmic midwives, egging us on. Come on, little baby, you can do it. You can do it. You got to get rid of your bosses. You understand? These are labor pains. You got to get rid of your rulers. You got to get rid of your owners. But once y'all can break through, you will see that we've always been here, waiting for you to evolve, waiting for you to come to the level that we are in. And so that's why you see all of these horror movies, all of these movies about aliens, and they want to take over humans, and they just want to keep us as slaves. And if that's the case, then we already met the aliens. We already met the aliens. They in positions of power. They're government. You know what I'm saying? They're kings and emperors and shit. Them the aliens. This is not some lizard people or some grays looking to do the worst possible thing. That shit is a distraction. These stories are distractions. One, to keep us always looking for ways to escape the mother. We
Right.
cannot keep having these delusions about how there's going to be some great escape that we all make from Earth because Earth is in such bad shape. That's not what we need to be talking about. That's not what we need to be aspiring to or hoping for. We
Correct.
live on a planet that remains bountiful even as our rulers and bosses and these malignant people on the planet attempt to destroy her. She is still bountiful. She is still kicking ass and taking names. She's waiting for us to join. She's waiting for us to be willing, integrative participants in the liberation of the human spirit, the singular human spirit that embodies all 8 billion of us that live on this planet. That's what has to happen. That's what, if we have brothers and sisters that are extraterrestrials and shit like that, that's what they're waiting on. It's like, they gonna do it, they gonna win. They're gonna win. And then they too can, then we can give them some technological advances. We can teach them how to communicate telepathically. They can experience all of that, but they have to wage this battle to defend their own mother first. That's what they have to
Absolutely.
do.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think
And
telepathy
so,
has become prominent since December 2020. I feel it. It's here.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
think it's a much more encouraging way to look at, because the government is priming us. The government is priming us to accept some horror story about aliens. They're preparing us. No, I'm serious. I'm deadly serious. The
Oh,
government
okay.
is always releasing information about extraterrestrials. They're doing this to scare people. They're doing this to terrify people. And so because there has to be an enemy, whether it's an extraterrestrial, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, there always has to be an enemy, you see? And so if they can get us distracted by enemy consciousness, by creating the proverbial bad guy that's always out there looming, as if it's not people sitting in positions of power that are the proverbial bad guys, then we will never channel and focus our energy on dismantling institutions that uphold slavery, uphold human trafficking, uphold all things bad that exist on the planet. We'll never collectivize and focus our energy on dismantling those systems. We'll always be looking for some great big elusive bad guy that's green and has a tail or whatever. That's not what I'm on. I'm not interested in freaking lizard people or alien hybrid humans or any of that shit. That's not the issue. The issue is we live on a very real planet that is in very real dire straits, and we know exactly who is causing it. We know their names, we know where they live, we know what corporations they own. That's the only thing we should be focusing on. And the mother,
Absolutely.
and that's not separate from a conversation on the necessity of goddess centered worshiping societies. It's not separate, it's intimately connected to them. Because
Absolutely.
it's Father God rituals, it's Father God religions, it's Father God ceremonies that have us in the quagmire that we're in the first place. We wouldn't be here if we had not buried the mother and started following behind the son, giving the power of the mother to her son, centering the worship of his malignant self over his own mother. We wouldn't even be in the mess that we're in right now.
Right.
So I don't know if that was helpful about the Saturn
Definitely.
Jupiter conjunction.
Every conversation that comes to resurrecting the goddess wisdom today is important, and going forward, it is getting even more important. I personally sense
Absolutely is.
it. And yes, I have taken difficult decisions to not follow that I was following all the way once I came to such revelations about what happened with the goddesses. So,
I
going
will
to
say one more
temple of
thing.
yeah, a little to
I
know
wanted to
about
say one more thing. I
yeah,
wanted to say one more thing before we segue to that. Um,
right.
I really appreciate your discussion earlier about your personal journey with Hinduism and the goddess imagery, or the goddess mythology within Hindu religious tradition. Because even again in Ifa, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, you have female Orisha, but it's like the males are always the ones that get the biggest props and do the coolest shit and whatever. It's all the stories around the tradition are focused primarily on the male aspect of these forces of nature, the Orisha, and the female personifications of the forces of nature are always relegated to like a back seat. You know what I'm saying? And in my study of Hinduism, and I am not a practitioner of Hinduism, though I relate heavily to the iconography and the mythology of Hindu tradition.
Can I come in there? Just to add
Oh,
to your point.
I was just gonna say, even though I've studied these things, whether it's Ifa or Risha, or whether it's Hinduism or whatever it is, I have been leaning heavily in most spaces exclusively on the goddess iconography. We didn't learn enough about male deities, male higher powers. I want to know all things, and so I focus on my ritual, on my ceremony around the goddess in whatever her manifestation is. Now I'll shut up.
Yeah, when you said Orisha, like since I have been on this journey of my research on her story, when you said Orisha in your videos, and since then I was looking at other things in India, there is a state called Odisha, and but it is written as Orissa.
Wow. Like ORISA?
ORISSA.
That okay. Whoa.
Every
And you said
when
that's a
I
state in India?
uh, it's a state in India, yeah. And
Keep going.
there is a story about Jagannath Puri, and it is supposed to have some element of like the heart organ of the god, but I am very sure it has something to do with the female. The kind of that is why Egyptian terms, Egyptian culture is very much related to what India has been. So India scooped out, Gondwana was the thing. India scooped out and moved this side. So certain parts have moved here. But it surprises me in my research and my meditation that I've gone through pretty much what is happening in the West. The terms are very relatable to the cities that are named here in India. And
Fascinating.
I could not ignore that after the revelations. It was not possible. The western coastal India is connected to very much the Egyptian culture, the Tantra lineage, and all of that. And then when this Orisha and then Odisha, such names, if you really sit for it, there are a lot of synchronicities. So
Well, they're
that
not
made me
synchronicities.
even more
They're not
stronger to know
they're not
deeply
synch
about
I want to tell you, they're not
that.
synchronicities. The reason why is because when so it's important. It's extremely important what you're saying. I like have chills everywhere. But I want to correct you. They are not synchronicities. The problem has been that outside of Egypt, you have a massive amount of culture and history in Africa that has been widely ignored by everyone on earth. And so we think it's like odd coincidences when we see similarities here and there and everywhere, but nobody has spent as much time on like the Sudanese area and the Mali Empire and you know the lower regions of Egypt and so on and so forth. Um, the way that they have spent that time on Egypt. Like Egypt is like separate from the rest of Africa as far as the West is concerned. I'm
Uh,
saying this for a reason, is because in the study of Orisha history, of the history of the Yoruba people, their origin, there is an entity like an ancient ancestor that the Orisha that the Yoruba people talk about. His name is Oduduwa. And there's a song Emi omo dudua owalo, emi omo dudua owalo, bimolo sile, bimolo soja, bimolo sile sha, emi omo dudua owalo. This song is about the relationship or the history of the Yoruba people to Oduduwa. Oduduwa was actually from Kemet, from Egypt. And so, even when you're studying Kemetic or Egyptian spiritual history and the spiritual systems of Ifa, when I talk about Orisha and the forces of nature, there is an enormous amount of overlap because supposedly the ancient ancestor of the Yoruba people was himself Egyptian. So, when you're talking about a state in India called Orissa, right, spelled like Orisha, but with one less S, there is, and once you start learning these histories that have been deliberately hidden, because
hidden,
Ifa too is about as old as Hinduism,
much
5 to 6 thousand years old. And so when you start learning these histories outside of just Egyptian history, you will be, because it's happened to me here in the United States, baby. I've got chills everywhere. I have met people in Native American reservations here in Los Angeles and Arizona and New Mexico, who I go onto a reservation and their spiritual practice and ceremony, and they live in the reservation. They don't leave the reservation. It's like a country within a country. And their spiritual practices are identical to people in Mali, to people in Southern Africa. I mean, even the outfits, even the ceremonial makeup. And I'm sitting here like, oh my God.
Oh,
Even some of the names,
even this
even some,
has it. And I have to show you one more thing. This is one wallpaper which has a lot of Egyptian things in it.
I can barely see it.
Yeah,
I
here?
can't make it out. It just, no, it just looks like stucco.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah,
okay?
it doesn't look like images.
Yeah, so there
But
are carvings over there. Is it visible?
I can't see them at all.
Okay. So it was like,
But the reason I said it was really important what you said, right, about these similarities, especially to like Egyptian culture that you are experiencing, is one of the projects that I really want to take on once the temple is moving in a way that can sustain more research. Women
right.
doing research to bridge
Yes.
these gaps in our culture
Count me
is
in. Count me
yes,
in when it comes to the research.
finding women of color from the seven continents, from the main continents, to contribute in a circle, to contribute what they know about their ancestral cultures, and then we start cross-referencing the similarities between
Right.
those cultures as a way to bridge those gaps that I feel, I'm confident, are deliberately created by patriarchy to keep women away from reclaiming our contributions to the development of and unfolding of human history, right? And I noticed it. This is not something that is new. I started really obsessing about this as a medical student. I finished medical school 10 years ago. And when I was in med school, my programs were these overlapping medical systems: Native American, South American, Central American, African, different aspects of African medicine, like South African Sangoma medicine, West African, East African, Kemetic, European. I was taking a lot of Nordic region, like Islander, Icelandic,
Huge.
traditional herbs. And then my focus, obviously, was traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. But even with the study in traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, that included Thai medicine, Korean medicine, Korean hand acupuncture, Japanese acupuncture and herbs, so on and so forth. So when you start studying, also homeopathy was a huge part of the program, right? Ayurveda was a massive part of the program. So when you start just studying these things, and white people studying these things, they see them in these little lines. Oh, this is this, this is this, this is, and they don't start studying the web of connections between these things. But this shit just started firing everywhere. I was like, oh my God, this is what the spiritual use of herbs are in West Africa. And this is how it relates to the medicinal use of these very same herbs by a different name in China. Oh my God, this is amazing. We should do a whole cross-reference book just of herbs and their spiritual and medicinal uses across cultures. That shit would be mind-blowing.
Yes,
And so
of
what,
course. And
as a
just to
political
come in there,
activist,
yeah, just to come in there, the reason I showed you this, there's an artwork with all this Egyptian thing over here. And once this was here at our home, the same piece was not available anywhere else. So that made me deeply thinking. And in lockdown, I used to always keep looking at it. It has that Aquarius sign in it. What does this mean with the age of Aquarius? So that became important for me. So it's that is why I literally sacrificed my social life and I sat in the home and I was like, what does this home mean to me? It became very
mm-hmm.
important because the signs were right here in my place, and I never took it seriously until last this whole lockdown shit that happened.
Well, I will tell you the other significance about that period, the Great Conjunction, and the fact that we were still in the height of COVID and stationing at home during this conjunction. I feel like the stationing at home was important to get us reacquainted with the discomfort of existing in our bodies. See, our lives have been created to be distractions. We go to work, we come home, we feed the kids, we do homework, then we do our own homework or whatever, and then we get up and we do it all over to constantly keep us busy. So a lot of people, and I was still practicing pretty heavily during COVID. A lot of people were in crisis because they were not used to sitting in silence. They weren't used to being in their house for more than a couple hours at a time because they were always somewhere. They were at work, they were out getting drinks after work. It was like we were evading being at home. We were avoiding going home, right? And so now you stuck at home, your baby's stuck at home. You haven't had a conversation longer than an hour with your kids because they're at school while you're at work, and you come home and you eat dinner together. How was school? Okay, you got homework, let's go. Boom, 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 boom. And so
Yeah,
people were experiencing an
literally.
extreme existential crisis during especially the first 6 months of COVID, because people had forgotten how to relate to the people closest to them, to their loved ones, to the people that they occupy a space with, but didn't really live together because they were always outside of the home. It was a preparation for us, I believe. And that's what I was teaching the whole time, is that COVID, if we could be present and stop woeing and complaining about getting out of the house, COVID was a preparation about what kind of energy it is going to take to sustain and create a new world,
Correct.
right?
Yes,
People were
100%.
forced to educate their children at home when they didn't think that they had the ability to do it. And so this taught us how to homeschool our children, how to be able to work from home. People didn't think that they would be able to make the same kind of living working from home. That permanently changed as a consequence of COVID. We learned a lot in COVID about what it is to be self-sufficient and to redefine community, to redefine what it means to live in spaces together, to live in communities together.
Right.
And I think that we're too anxious to forget COVID. And in the quote forgetting of COVID, we have forgotten the very, very valuable lessons that came as a consequence. That is not separate from the impact of the conjunction, because the other
But there
thing
was
that
a
we
lot
have
of
to do
energy
now,
influx also. There was higher energy influx. If people have got it right, they have pulled on those frequencies. I can
yeah,
sense that. Yeah, amazing.
yeah, and I think that what's going to have to happen is that two, now we've spent enough time at home by ourselves. We've spent enough time in our places by ourselves. Now we have to be in groups, because the change that we're talking about ushering in cannot happen with us living in isolation, being in isolation. Now we have to have deliberate groups. What I mentioned all the way an hour ago about reinventing, weavers circles, weavers ceremonies, the pottery, not as just something to put your hand in the dirt, but to allow your flesh to remember what it means for spirit and flesh to exist harmoniously in the same space. Our home, our house is a metaphor. Us stationing at home for 2 years, our house is a metaphor, and us getting comfortable being in our house for long periods of time is a metaphor for the same thing that has to happen in our flesh. Spirit and flesh becoming harmoniously united in the execution of building this future. That happens
Very well.
when we, like-minded people, come together in material space in the flesh. Doesn't mean that we can't live in our apartment by ourselves. I'm not saying that we have to live in communes or no shit like that. That's not really my thing. I am saying that even as we live in spaces alone, that we can create spaces where we come together to weave and construct the fucking future. That is what I'm saying. And that has to
Totally.
happen in spaces where we are together physically.
Right. Lovely. Even I am on that point where I want to come up with the Tantra centers and something like Tantra temple where we worship men and women in a biological truth, not some idol worship. None of that, because those downloads are coming to me.